name is Jaci Barton, and I live in the village of Cotuit. Lots of special memories. Of course, a lot of them are the memories of going to Kettleers games, which are really important to the village of Cotuit and I think to Cape Wide. One specific moment in history stands out in my mind, and that is when the Cotuit Mosquito Yacht Club celebrated its 100th anniversary. I think that was 2006. They had a parade of sail that had about 70 Cotuit skiffs, and then they had the biggest skiff race ever, which was about 75 skiffs, as I recall. But what was special about that, we have a sailboat, but it's not a skiff. And we were on our mooring watching the start of the race. It was one of those absolutely incredible blue sky days that we all live for on Cape Cod, sparkling waters. And as the boats kind of jockeyed for position at the start line, Mother Nature decided that it was time for all of us to stop and take a really close look, that we would probably never, ever, ever see this in our lifetime. And the wind stopped. And they all sat there for about what seemed like an eternity to those who were at the beginning of the race. And one by one, they picked up a little wind and went over the starting line. But it was really, really special to see that many sailboats in Cotuit Harbor, all the same boats, some of them 100 years old, I'm sure, sailing in the bay, and the likes of which we never saw before. And like I said, we will never, ever see it again. That's an interesting question. First, I think that, Len, when I came to Cape Cod, it was simply for a job. And the first summer that I was here, we lived on Joshua's Pond in Osterville. And we paid those high summer rents that you still have to pay during those months today. And we realized that if we really wanted to stay here, and we already loved Cape Cod, that we needed to buy a house. And so we started looking around. Mashpee was all under Indian land dispute at the time. My husband was working in Falmouth, I in Hyannis, and we happened upon Oregon Beach in Cotuit, down at the end of Main Street. And we walked out on the beach and looked out at Nantucket Sound, and we both got tears in our eyes, and we basically said, we want to live here. We didn't sail then, we didn't know about the town dock, but there was something special about what we experienced. And we basically went back to the realtor we were working with, and he said, you know, not a chance you're going to find a house. We looked at two, we bought the second one. That was 1978. So I think that basically the land protection part of it grew out of a deep love of community and the special place that we live in. And I was lucky enough basically to just be recruited to work for the Barnstable Land Trust by a fellow by the name of Sepp Dietzken, who was the then treasurer of the Land Trust. I had been working with his wife on other if you will, political issues, and she saw in me the ability to lead and be committed, and that was 30 years ago. So I think the bottom line is I fell in love with the community, and I felt that by getting involved, I could do something to help preserve it. The point of the Barnstable Land Trust is to preserve the natural resources within the community, wetlands, woodlands, wildlife, water quality, and generally to make sure that future generations have similar experiences to those of us who have grown to love this place and those who came before us. Things like clamming and swimming and fishing. Make sure that the water is clean to drink and that the coastal waters are enjoyable not only for clamming, but for recreational uses. So basically, it's about quality of life. It was tough, but again, being part of the solution made it easier because I felt I could do something to help, to help make things happen. Well, let me start out by saying that it was the Conservation Commission that really had the concept of the Barnstable Land Trust. And when we were founded in 1983, it was at the behest of Buzz Putnam of Marston's Mills, Liz Clark of Osterville, Bob Mullen, who lived in Marston's Mills, Gene Whiteley, and Gil Newton of Cotuit. Septitskin, as I mentioned earlier, who all came together at a meeting held by the Conservation Commission and decided who was going to be president, who was going to be vice president, and who was going to be treasurer. And from that, the organization was born, again, by people who loved the community and wanted to do something about it. So they were the first board of directors of Barnstable Land Trust. Over the years, of course, there have been many, some who have stayed for a long time, like Tom Mullen, others who come, decide maybe it's not the thing for them. But by and large, it's a hardworking group of people who all share a love of Cape Cod and figure that they can do something to help make a difference. Well, I count the town's successes as our successes as well, because in the early, when I first started with Barnstable Land Trust, the town was busy with its open space task force, just defining the important parcels of land in each village, and that subsequently led to a major vote, I think the largest exemption vote from Prop 2.5 in the history of the town of Barnstable, where we had 492 acres protected for $17.1 million. And that particular initiative, Barnstable Land Trust was involved in an advocacy role, if you will, helping to educate the people and helping to get a turnout at the polls, because we obviously wanted a good turnout, so it was a good, and it was a resounding victory. But that protected things like Crocker Neck and the Darby property in Osterville, the land around Joshua's and Micah's Pond, and the Danforth property where the golf course is now, as well as several other parcels of land. And so the answer, I think, to your question is that we've worked as an advocate to preserve land, as well as in our own right, which is why the Conservation Commission saw a need for us to preserve land, maybe by people who wanted to give it to Barnstable Land Trust, or who simply didn't trust government, because even back then there was a distrust of government. I think it's gotten worse since then. And so we offer that alternative. But oftentimes we work hand in hand with the town to help preserve a piece of land. And now with the land bank getting morphed into the Community Preservation Act and the funding that's there to help, the current project that we're working on, the Lowell Park project, has been the beneficiary of CPA funding. The Corkage property in Barnstable Village that we finished last year has been the beneficiary of CPA funding. So we work hand in hand, but in our own right, we've preserved at this point 1,048 acres and completed 148 projects. So by the end of the year, Lowell Park completed, hopefully, we should be at 1,075 and 150 parcels. So at the turn of the century, the Lowell family, in bits and pieces, gave to the town of Barnstable land on which to build a school. The school was subsequently torn down, and as the land was aggregated, it became a recreational area and a place for the Cotuit Kettleers to play. And the Kettleers have been playing there, I think, for about 70 years. And the Lowell family has always known that the existing field has expanded onto the 19 acres that they own. They basically own a portion of left field, center field, and right field, land that abuts Putnam Avenue, Lowell Avenue, and East Lane, and is backed by Old Post Road extension. But that 19 acres is basically the green wall of trees behind Lowell Park. A portion of the field itself, center field, the bullpen in right field, the visiting bullpen, a portion of left field, the flagpole, all those things are on the 19 acres that the Lowell family owns. So it's critical to preserve that 19 acres in order to make sure that the ball field can stay where it is, because there's not enough room in the 5 acres that the town owns to be able to move the ball field around to stay on its land. But the land is also in a zone of contribution to Cotuit's public water supply. The water flows down gradient to Cotuit Bay, so it'll help protect Cotuit Bay. It's on a scenic road, so all kinds of reasons to preserve it. There's endangered species there, and it's just, if that became other than the woods that it is, it would be a very, very different experience. It varies. It's an interesting job. I never know what's going to come up in any given day. But part of the fun of the job is that it is very different from day to day. Yesterday I got a phone call from someone who wants to preserve a piece of land. And so now the question is, does the board of directors want to accept that gift? They'll decide it's in a zone of contribution, it's on a pond. I would be surprised if they said no. They've never said no unless there was a liability issue. They haven't said no. But there is concern for us on acquiring isolated parcels of land and our ability to manage them over time. So more often than not, we want to see land that is either next to protected land or next to vacant land that could be protected so that we can preserve larger ecosystems in the process. But in terms of raising money, it's constant, Len. You know, it's like you have to be constantly asking. We ask in every way we can. This year, we were in the 4th of July parade handing out brochures about Lowell Park. We've been at every home game of the Kettleers for the past 2 seasons. And again, educating people about the work that we do and why that particular project is so important. So we do everything besides the knocking on doors and dialing for dollars. The first town council was, I think, very different than today's town council, in large part because it was a new form of government, and I think we all felt responsible for making sure that we got off to a good start. We worked very, very closely together. We had to create rules for governance, and I think there was a recognition that we were all equals, and that we were all working for the same purpose. Again, the betterment of the community. And I think that I don't know, it was new, so we didn't take anything for granted. I think that the toughest thing is that I think that the town council gets too involved in administrative issues, and that they perhaps don't understand that their job is legislation, not administration. And so if we can do something to try to make that happen so that the town manager has more autonomy somehow, and the town council does plays the legislative role that they were designed to play, I think we'd be healthier as a community. Oh, let's see, Cotuit Bay, Nantucket Sound, out on the water, sailing, rowing, swimming, I think. On land, boy, I haven't been to Crocker Neck in a long time, but that's certainly a favored place. And then, of course, lands that Barnstable Land Trust own. They're favored places. I love the spring because of the renewal when we have a good spring and the skies are blue, but oftentimes, of course, it's gray. I love the summer. For all the things that we're able to do. But I think that fall is probably my favorite because it's when it gets quiet again and the waters are still warm and we're able to enjoy Cape Cod in all its glory. Yeah, sadly, I drive in from Cotuit and spend most of my time in the office, except for when I have to go out to meetings or appointments. So when my office was on Winter Street, I got out and about more, but where I am down at the other end, I don't get to see Hyannis as much as I used to. I do take opportunity from time to time when I go out and get lunch to drive down to the harbor and just see what's happening on Main Street. It's different, and I think that Hyannis, in the years that I've worked for Barnstable Land Trust, Hyannis has certainly gotten a lot more beautiful. You know, I think that the town has done a lot of work to make it more special, more attractive. I think the business owners have done a lot to that with their facade improvements, et cetera. But it's certainly, it's very, very, very different. Most of the time, unless I come over to town hall, when I'm in Hyannis, I seldom see someone that I know. I think we still have work to do, and I think again, it's constant work on the issue of housing and jobs. You know, I think some people talk about making Cape Cod Community College a 4-year college, and that certainly would help if that were ever to happen. By and large, from Barnstable Land Trust perspective, we hire an intern every summer, and it's my hope that that intern will grow to love Cape Cod if they don't already, and stay here. In fact, the summer intern that I had in 2014, I hired at the end of the summer, and she's with me today. Boy, there are lots of exciting moments. But and it's a funny thing, I hate to think back 30 years, but I think the day that the people of Barnstable voted to preserve that 492 acres, because I was new at the job, so to speak, and the work that we had done, and the resounding support, I think, for conservation in this community, it was exhilarating, and I think it really helped me to begin my life at Barnstable Land Trust, if you will, helping to preserve the community, knowing that people cared. And I think that's one thing that I could always count on when I was on the town council, that my constituent base, there were two things that were important: education and conservation. It's really preserving this special place. I think by and large, the people. I think people care. I think we're lucky in many ways to have a lot of retired people who give back to the community. I think they give back both at the village level and at the town level. I think the villages themselves are a strength. Certainly each village is different. Each one has its own characteristics and its own characters within the community. That help to define each place and help to make it the special place that it is. And so I think the major strengths, the library system, that there's a library in each one of the villages. When you think about it, there's probably not another place in the Commonwealth, certainly, that has the kind of unique village system that we have. Each one could be its own little town. I oftentimes say that I think that the towns, and this certainly isn't just Barnstable, but that we zoned long before we planned. And had we understood the natural resource infrastructure beneath us, especially our groundwater, I don't think we ever would have zoned and planned to develop the way we have. But now that we have, and we have to live with it, I think our biggest challenge really is protecting the waters, safeguarding the waters that we drink, and those waters that feed into our estuaries where we all like to play in the summer. The places where we clam, the Katuitt oysters, Weano oysters, the sailing, swimming, that needs to be protected if we're going to really protect this place for future generations and encourage the kids to stay. I'm not coming up with any changes. The biggest challenge is dealing with wastewater. I think in this day and age, again, the Title V septic systems that nobody understood, they simply don't take care of the waste that we generate, and as such are affecting our groundwater and our coastal waters. I think that's probably the biggest change that we need to do, and that's all, of course, part of the 208 wastewater planning that the town is undergoing right now. I meditate. I like to take quiet walks in the woods, though I don't get to do it nearly enough. I used to love to sew, and I'm looking forward to a time when I can get back to that. But I'm not yet. So I feel like I'm still in my community fulfillment days, and so when I move away from that, then I can get back into my personal fulfillment days. Jaci Barton from the village of Katuitt.